There's something I want to tell you that might be hard to hear, but I believe you already know it deep down. You've felt it in the silence after a cold phone call. You've heard it in the sharpness of a comment that didn't need to be so sharp. And maybe you felt it most of all in that quiet ache, the one that lives right behind your ribs, when you realize you're no longer being treated like the parent you once were. You've become someone they tolerate, a background character in their busy lives. And sometimes, if you're honest, someone they push away without a second thought. I want you to know this isn't just happening to you. All across this world, good mothers and fathers who sacrificed, who gave love, who stayed up nights worrying, are being spoken to by their adult children in ways that no human being, let alone a parent, should ever be spoken to. And you don't deserve it. You never have. So let's talk. Not with anger, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Let's talk about the phrases that should stop you in your tracks. The words that, when spoken by your grown child, aren't just rude, they're revealing. They're signals. Red flags, a quiet alarm telling you it's time to pull back, protect your heart, and maybe even walk away. Because love doesn't mean you should accept disrespect. Being a parent doesn't mean you're required to endure cruelty in silence. And growing older doesn't mean you should get smaller to fit into someone else's version of your worth. You know, I remember once a woman telling me about a phone call she got from her daughter. This woman, let's call her Carol, was in her 70s. She had helped raise her granddaughter when her daughter was going through a divorce, picked her up from school, cooked dinner, gave money she really couldn't spare. And one day, she got a call, not to say thank you, not to check in, but to hear these words. You're just being dramatic. You always make everything about you. And just like that, Carol shrunk. She told me it felt like her spine curled in on itself. All her years, her love, her effort, dismissed with a sentence. That phrase right there. You're just being dramatic. That's one of them. One of the phrases I want to talk to you about today. When your adult child says something like that, it doesn't just sting, it invalidates. It pushes your feelings off the table like they don't matter. And here's the truth. Someone who loves you, someone who sees you, doesn't do that. When a grown child calls you dramatic, they're not trying to understand you. They're trying to shut you down, make you small, dismiss your pain so they don't have to face it. But your pain is real. Your voice matters. You're not overreacting. You're reacting to something that hurts. And the moment they belittle your experience like that, they are telling you who they are in that moment. Believe them. It's not your job to beg them to see you. It's not your role to keep explaining why you're hurt. And it's certainly not your burden to keep swallowing that pain just to keep the peace. Because peace built on silence is not peace. It's quiet suffering. Let me tell you another story. This one from a man named Harold. His son had stopped visiting long ago. Only called when he needed something, usually money. And one afternoon, after Harold had to say no to a request he simply couldn't afford, his son snapped back with these words. "You owe me, after everything I went through because of you." Now, maybe Harold wasn't the perfect father. None of us are perfect parents. But he did his best. He worked 2 jobs. He stayed. He showed up. And to hear his own son say those words, "You owe me," was like being kicked in the gut. That phrase, it cuts deep, doesn't it? Because it flips everything on its head. Suddenly, you're not the parent who gave. You're the villain, the one who must now pay, endlessly, for mistakes that maybe aren't even yours to carry. It's one thing to have an honest conversation about the past. It's another to weaponize it. When an adult child uses guilt like a leash, trying to keep you tethered to their pain, especially after you've tried to make amends or explain. They aren't looking for healing. They're looking for control. And control is not love. You see, some people think that just because you're a parent, you're stuck forever in the role of fixer, of apologizer, of giver. But you are not a vending machine for love and resources. You are a human being with needs, with limits, with value. You have the right to say no. You have the right to ask for respect. And yes, you have the right to walk away from relationships that only drain and diminish you. You might be thinking, but he's my son, or she's still my daughter. And I understand. That bond runs deep. But blood is not a free pass to wound. Being related to someone doesn't give them the right to speak to you like you're disposable. And every time you allow it, you teach them it's okay. But it's not okay. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do, for them and for yourself, is to stop showing up for conversations that leave you bleeding. Sometimes, the only way they will understand your worth is if you stop giving them the chance to step on it. And I know that sounds harsh. But this isn't about punishment. This is about truth, about dignity, about reclaiming your own peace. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you hung up the phone and felt lighter? When was the last time you visited your grown children and came home smiling? If those moments are few and far between, if more often you leave those interactions feeling small, shamed, or shattered, then something's wrong. And it's not you. There's a kind of loneliness that comes not from being alone, but from being unseen. From sitting across the table from your own child and feeling like a stranger. From realizing that they're no longer interested in who you are, only in what you can do for them. Or worse, what you can stop doing to make their lives easier. But you are not an inconvenience. You are not a burden. And anyone who makes you feel like one doesn't deserve your presence. Now, I'm not saying to slam the door. I'm not saying to block their number. But I am saying, listen. Listen to the words they use. Really listen. Because when someone shows you their priorities through the way they speak to you, believe them. You can love someone from a distance. You can care for them and still protect yourself. You can leave the emotional battlefield and still hold on to hope that one day they'll meet you again, not as a servant to their needs, but as a soul worthy of love. We've already touched on two phrases that reveal a lot. You're being dramatic, and you owe me. But these are just the beginning. There are more. Words that seem small but carry big shadows. Phrases that, if left unchecked, slowly chip away at your sense of self. And that's the real danger. Not the fight, not the disagreement, but the slow erosion of your inner light. The quiet surrender of your boundaries. The moment you stop expecting respect and start settling for scraps. But you deserve more than scraps. You deserve to be spoken to with kindness. You deserve conversations that lift, not crush. You deserve to sit across from your child and feel seen, not tolerated. And if that's not happening, you're allowed to change the script. You're allowed to step back. And if necessary, you're allowed to leave. Sometimes, it's not just what they say. It's how often they say it. The third phrase I want to talk about today shows up quietly at first. It slips into a conversation when your child is tired or annoyed. Maybe you let it pass once, twice. But then it becomes a pattern. It sounds like this. You're overthinking it. Now, on the surface, that might not seem so cruel. It almost sounds caring, doesn't it? As if they're trying to calm you down. But listen closer. There's a dismissiveness wrapped in those words, a subtle way of saying, what you feel doesn't matter. Your concerns aren't real. Imagine you bring up something small, maybe how they haven't returned your calls for a week, or how it hurt when they canceled dinner again without a reason. And instead of hearing you out, instead of asking, why did that bother you? They wave it off with, you're overthinking it. That's not compassion. That's erasure. And I've seen too many good people, especially those our age, start questioning their own instincts after hearing that kind of thing too often. They start thinking, maybe I really am too sensitive. Maybe I expect too much. But let me remind you of something. Your feelings are not a flaw. They are part of your wisdom, part of your life story. You've lived long enough to know when something doesn't sit right. You've earned the right to speak up about it. And when someone says, you're overthinking it, what they often mean is, I don't want to deal with what you're saying. It's a shortcut out of accountability. Let me tell you about a man named Richard. He's 74, kind, thoughtful, quiet. He told me once about a moment with his daughter. He had sent her a long message. Nothing dramatic, just honest. He said he felt like their relationship had changed, like he was being held at arm's length. And she replied with just 4 words. You're overthinking it, Dad. He never brought it up again, but it stayed with him. Not because of the words themselves, but because of what came after. Nothing. No follow-up, no curiosity, no space for his truth. That's the danger of that phrase. It doesn't just shut down the conversation. It shuts down the connection. And if you've been made to feel like your thoughts are a problem, let me say this clearly. You are not the problem. Wanting to be heard is not overthinking. Wanting to feel close is not overreacting. Wanting to be respected is not too much. What is too much is pretending you're okay with being ignored. There comes a time when silence becomes self-betrayal, when smiling through disrespect becomes a habit. And when that happens, you lose little pieces of yourself. Until one day you look in the mirror and don't recognize who's staring back. So the next time someone says, you're overthinking it, I want you to pause. Ask yourself, is that true? Or are they just uncomfortable with my truth? And if the answer is the second one, don't shrink. Stand in your knowing. You don't have to argue. You don't have to explain. Just know that your insight is not a burden. It's a gift, one they may not be ready to receive. Now let's talk about the 4th phrase. This one is especially painful because it sounds so final, so cold, so absolute. It's when your adult child says, that's just who I am. Deal with it. I want you to really hear those words. That's just who I am. Not, I'm sorry I hurt you. Not, let's talk about it. Just, deal with it. That's not honesty. That's resignation. That's someone telling you they have no intention of growing, no interest in meeting you halfway, and no room in their heart to consider your experience. We all have flaws, but refusing to grow is not a flaw. It's a choice. And when someone uses that phrase, what they're really saying is, your feelings are less important than my comfort. That's a dangerous place to be in any relationship, but especially between a parent and a child. Think about it. Would you ever have said something like that to your own parents? Even when you were young and stubborn? Didn't you at least feel the weight of their sacrifice? The pull of that invisible thread called respect. That phrase, deal with it, cuts that thread. It says, I no longer feel accountable to you. And if that's the case, if someone you raised, someone you fed, someone you held through sickness and heartbreak, feels so detached that they can say that to your face, then maybe it's time to stop trying to hold on to what's no longer real. Letting go isn't failure. Sometimes it's the only way to stop hurting. I knew a woman once named Teresa, 81 years old, graceful, soft-spoken, sharp as a tack. Her son was a successful man, lived just 20 minutes away. But every time she brought up how much she missed him, how she wished they'd have dinner more often, he'd say, "This is just my life now, Mom. Deal with it." So she did. She stopped calling. She stopped trying. And you know what happened? She started painting again, took long walks, made new friends at a local book club. Her world, once so narrow, opened up. And one day he called, not to ask for anything, just to talk. Sometimes it takes stepping back for people to finally see what they're losing. But whether they see it or not, that's not up to you. Your only responsibility is to yourself, to your peace, to your healing. If someone refuses to grow, you don't have to stay stuck beside them. You are not a prisoner of the past. You are not required to deal with cruelty, detachment, or emotional laziness. You've lived too long and loved too much to settle for that. Let me ask you something. When did we start thinking that growing old means we have to become invisible? That our only job is to smile and nod and never make waves? That we have to accept coldness just to stay connected? Connection without warmth is not connection. It's captivity. And you, my friend, were not born to be a prisoner in your own life. You were born to be respected, to be seen, to be treated like the wise, whole, extraordinary person that you are. There's one more phrase I want to talk about, but not just yet. First, I want you to take a breath, a deep one. Let it out slowly and remind yourself, you are allowed to want more. Not out of entitlement, but out of self-respect. You've spent a lifetime pouring into others. It's not selfish to ask for dignity. It's not rude to expect kindness. It's human. And you, in all your humanness, still have so much to give, but only to those who will hold it with care. There's something sobering about realizing that the people you gave the most to are now the ones giving you the least. Not out of lack of time or life pressures. We all understand that. But out of something colder, a kind of emotional distance that says, I don't have to show up for you anymore. And when that belief takes root, it begins to show up in language. Sharp little phrases that carry the weight of abandonment dressed up as maturity. There's one phrase, though, that might be the most dangerous of all, because it wears a mask of logic. It hides behind boundaries, psychology, and modern slogans. But it leaves devastation in its wake. And that phrase is this: I need to protect my energy. Now I know, on its own, that idea doesn't sound so bad. After all, we've all learned, especially as we get older, how precious our peace is. We understand that not every conflict is worth entering. Not every drama deserves a front row seat in our lives. But when your grown child says to you, their own mother or father, I can't be around you because I need to protect my energy, without any willingness to talk, to heal, to even try to understand, what they're really saying is this: you're the problem, and I'd rather erase you than work on this. That's not a boundary. That's a wall. And behind that wall, they're choosing to stay safe from discomfort rather than reach toward connection. I once heard from a father, let's call him Sam, who had always had a complicated relationship with his daughter. There had been tension when she was a teen, arguments during college, and some things said in both directions that stung. But Sam had tried. He'd apologized, invited her over, offered space when needed. And then one day, after he sent her a birthday message and asked if they could meet for coffee, she replied with this: "I'm focusing on myself right now. I can't have you draining my energy." He stared at the message for nearly an hour, not because he didn't understand the words, but because he didn't understand how she could say them to him. What had he done that was so toxic? Showed up, checked in, admitted he missed her? There's a trend now, especially among younger generations, to cut people out quickly, to label any tension as toxic, to avoid emotional labor at all costs. And while, yes, there are relationships that are deeply unhealthy, there's also something deeply human about working through pain together, about not discarding people who love you simply because they're imperfect. When your adult child puts you in the bad energy category, especially without conversation, without context, without care, they're doing something profoundly cruel. They're rewriting the narrative in their own favor and leaving you to sit with the ruins. And I want to be clear. You don't need to accept that. You are not a threat because you want to talk. You are not toxic because you feel hurt. You are not bad energy because you expressed sorrow or longed for closeness or even made mistakes that you tried to make right. That's just being human. But when they weaponize these new buzzwords to justify abandonment, they're telling you that their comfort matters more than your humanity. And if that's the message they're sending, again, you are allowed to leave. Not out of vengeance, not out of drama, but because staying in that space, where you're cast as the villain in someone else's healing journey, is not healing for you. You get to protect your energy too. Now, I want to speak to something that may be echoing inside you as you hear all this. That quiet voice that whispers, "But maybe I caused all of this. Maybe I deserve this distance." Let me tell you something. And I want you to hear it like a father would say to his friend, not like a counselor or a speaker. Even if you made mistakes, especially if you made mistakes, your willingness to reflect, to grow, to own them means something. There's a difference between being imperfect and being unworthy. And I've never met a single parent who got it all right. But I've met many who tried, who stayed up through the fevers, who worked extra shifts, who bit their tongue when their hearts were breaking, who showed up even when they were running on empty. You don't erase all of that with one phrase. You don't throw away a parent like a worn-out coat just because they have flaws. Love isn't supposed to be so conditional. So if you're sitting there wondering if maybe you're the one who broke everything, pause, take a breath, and look at the whole story, not just the chapter they keep throwing in your face. Because a life is more than its worst moments. And healing isn't supposed to look like exile. Sometimes we mistake silence for growth. We think that pulling away and cutting people off is a form of maturity. But maturity is being able to say, "I was hurt, but I'm willing to talk. This relationship matters to me, so let's find a better way." Maturity is hard. It's uncomfortable. It takes both sides. But when your grown child says they need to protect their energy, and what they really mean is, "I won't even hear you out," then you have a choice to make. Not to beg, not to prove yourself, but to protect your own peace. You can still love them. You can still carry their names in your prayers, their photos in your heart. But you don't have to keep opening the door to someone who keeps closing it in your face. It's okay to stop knocking. It's okay to sit quietly, tend to your own garden, and let the world come to you for once. You've done enough chasing. You've done enough explaining. You've done enough hurting. Now it's your turn to be whole, to be respected, to be free. There's a moment in life, Maybe it comes quietly in the middle of the night. Maybe it lands like a thunderclap during a phone call. When you realize something's changed, not just in the way your children speak to you, but in what they no longer say. That tenderness, that natural reverence, that small pause that used to be there when they addressed you with love. Gone, replaced with impatience, or worse, indifference. By now, we've talked about the words that wound, the phrases that reveal something broken under the surface. But there's one more I need to say out loud. Because if you hear it, and maybe you already have, you must understand just how serious it is. It sounds like this. I didn't ask for any of this. At first glance, it might seem like a statement of frustration. Maybe they're overwhelmed. Maybe they're feeling stretched too thin. But when those words come after you've offered your help, or worse, after you've reminded them of all you've done, not for praise, but just for understanding, they strike like a blade. I didn't ask for any of this. That's not just dismissal. That's erasure. That's someone taking the book of your shared life, the late nights, the scraped knees, the birthday cakes, the quiet sacrifices, and slamming it shut. And it leaves you there, stunned, like the ground has fallen out from under you. Because what do you even say to that? When a grown child looks you in the eye, or sends that message in a text, and says, I didn't ask for your parenting. I didn't ask for your protection. I didn't ask to be born. What they're really saying is, I reject the very foundation of our relationship. And that's not something to argue with. That's not something to fix. That's something to grieve. You see, that phrase, it reveals a belief that you were never really needed. That your role, your care, your devotion were somehow an imposition. And if you're not careful, you'll begin to believe it. You'll start retracing every decision, every effort, every tear, trying to see where you went wrong, trying to answer a question that was never yours to carry. But I want you to hear this from me clearly. You showed up. You did what love asked of you. You didn't always have the tools. You didn't always have the support. But you did it anyway. You kept going. And love, real love, is never wasted. Not even when it's unrecognized. Not even when it's thrown back at you. Love leaves a mark. Sometimes not on the person you gave it to, but on the kind of person you became in the giving. So when your child says, I didn't ask for this, don't let it rewrite your story. Don't let it make you small, because no child does ask to be born. But once they are blessed or not by who raises them. And if you loved, if you cared, if you stayed even when it hurt, you gave them a chance. That chance is not nothing. But sometimes people don't want to carry gratitude. It feels too heavy, too humbling. It's easier to push you away than to face the fact that maybe, just maybe, they're taking you for granted. And so they say the things that let them off the hook. I didn't ask for this. It's your fault I'm this way. You owe me. But here's the truth. That is not your weight to carry anymore. You've earned the right to step out from under it, because guilt has a way of sneaking into the heart like fog. It wraps around your thoughts. It confuses your memory. It whispers lies that sound like wisdom. Maybe I failed. Maybe this is just the consequence of my mistakes. But what if it's not? What if this isn't about what you did wrong, but about what they're unwilling to see? We live in a time now where accountability is demanded from parents, but grace is rarely returned. And yet, you still deserve grace. Even now, especially now. You deserve to be met with tenderness, You deserve someone to say, "I know it wasn't perfect, but thank you." You deserve arms that open, not just when you're needed, but when you're missed. But if that never comes, if you wait year after year, and all you hear is blame, silence, or that cold phrase, "I didn't ask for this," then you have a decision to make. And it's not about whether you love them. Of course you do. It's about whether you love yourself enough to stop chasing the version of them that used to look at you with affection. You can love the memory. You can cherish the child they once were. But you don't have to remain available to the adult they've chosen to become, if that adult continues to diminish you. And yes, people change. People go through phases. But love is not seasonal. It's not something to be rationed out when convenient. I want you to imagine something. Imagine sitting across from a friend. You're telling them how your adult child speaks to you. You quote those phrases we've talked about. You describe how it makes you feel, how small, how ashamed, how uncertain. Now imagine that friend looking at you and saying, "You need to protect yourself." You wouldn't argue with that, would you? But somehow, when it's your own child, your instinct is to justify, to explain, to hold out hope that maybe next time it will be different. Let me ask you gently, how many next times have there already been? How many years have you given to this loop? And how many more do you want to give? You see, this stage of life, it's sacred. You're not here to spend it begging for crumbs of affection. You're not here to earn what you've already paid for in full, with time, with care, with decades of devotion. You are here to live, to be light, to breathe easier, to choose peace, not just for them, but for yourself. Because leaving doesn't always mean goodbye. Sometimes it means letting go of the need to be right, or to be understood, or to be praised. It means stepping into your own presence, free of expectation. It means sitting with yourself at the end of the day and saying, "I stood up for my heart." And sometimes, that's the beginning of everything. Maybe what hurts most isn't the words themselves, but that they came from the person you once held in your arms, the one you stayed up with through fevers and heartbreak, the one who ran into your arms when they were little and now walks right past you as if you're just another figure in the background. But you are not in the background of your own life. And if you've made it to this moment, sitting here with me, heart open, asking yourself the hard questions, then I want to tell you something that matters more than anything we've said so far. You have the right to peace. You have the right to walk away from relationships that hurt more than they heal. You have the right to say, "Enough." Not out of anger, but out of wisdom. Out of finally seeing clearly what you've been hoping would change for far too long. You are not walking away from your children. You are walking toward your own self-respect. And if that sounds hard, I get it. I know it's easier said than done. Because we don't stop loving our children just because they've hurt us. That love is stitched into the fabric of our being. But love without respect becomes self-destruction. And I believe you've given enough of yourself to know when that line has been crossed. If you've heard those 5 phrases, you're just being dramatic. You owe me. You're overthinking it. That's just who I am. Deal with it. I didn't ask for any of this. And your heart sank, not once, but over and over. Then it's time to stop hoping their words will change. It's time to start listening to your own. Maybe you've spent the last 20 or 30 years trying to keep the peace. Maybe you've been holding together a bond that only you still fight for. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to stop surviving the relationship and start saving yourself. It doesn't have to be dramatic. You don't need to slam doors or make grand declarations. You can simply start choosing yourself, one moment at a time. Stop picking up every call that leaves you shaken. Stop chasing every apology that never comes. Stop rearranging your life to fit into the shrinking space they've left for you. Because here's what happens when you begin to reclaim your space. You remember your worth. You remember that before you were mom or dad, you were a whole person, with dreams, with talents, with a life beyond who you raised. You start waking up without dread. You sit in the quiet and it feels like peace instead of punishment. You start finding joy again in little things, a walk without your phone, a meal you cook just for you, a room in your home that feels like yours again. And slowly, like sun warming cold skin, you begin to heal. And maybe they come back. Maybe time softens them. Maybe something clicks, and they realize what they've lost in pushing you away. Maybe they return, not with guilt, but with grace. And if they do, you'll still have love to give. But it won't be given from fear. It won't be pulled out of obligation. It will come from a place of strength, because you'll no longer be handing them your heart like something breakable, praying they handle it with care. You'll be holding your own heart with both hands, knowing its value, whether they ever do or not. I know it's lonely sometimes, especially when everyone around you talks about family dinners, grandkids, holidays filled with laughter, and you sit in a quiet house wondering what you did wrong. But let me say this as gently and clearly as I can. Sometimes their behavior is not a reflection of your failures. It's a reflection of their choices. You cannot raise someone twice. You can only show up as the best version of yourself now. And if they choose to meet you there, you open the door. But if they don't, you close it without shame. You are not too much. You are not too needy. You are not too sensitive. You are just someone who finally said, I deserve to be treated better. So if this video found you in a moment of sadness or doubt or quiet pain, I want you to leave with something stronger than sorrow. I want you to leave with clarity, and maybe even with hope. Because this isn't the end. This is the beginning of a chapter you write for yourself. Not waiting by the phone, not twisting yourself to fit, but living, breathing, laughing again, letting new connections in, giving your kindness to people who reflect it back. The world doesn't stop offering love just because it stopped coming from one direction. There are still hands that will hold yours with care. There are still faces that will light up when they see you. There are still mornings meant to be lived without the weight of regret. So if no one has said it lately, let me say it now. You matter. You are worthy. And you are allowed to protect your soul. Even if that means walking away from the ones you once thought you'd never lose. And if this message stirred something in you, share it. Share your thoughts in the comments. Share your strength with others who are still trying to make sense of their own pain. Because when we speak the truth, we help each other rise. If this video gave you peace, insight, or comfort, click the like button. Subscribe if you'd like to walk this path of healing and self-respect with others. And know this, you are not alone, and you are not broken. You are simply waking up to the kind of love you deserve. And I wish you a full and joyful life, at any age, always.